Okay, so it is now 1:05 Atlantic, and we will begin our press conference today. My name is Tina O. I'm an organizer with No One is Illegal Nova Scotia, and I will be the host for today's press conference. I'm joined here today with our speakers representing maritime-based organizations. We have Ryan McRae with PEI's Cooper Institute. We have Kalum with the Madhu Center in New Brunswick, and Stacey Gomez with No One is Illegal Nova Scotia's Migrant Worker Program. We may also be joined by a fourth speaker, but that will be announced at a later time. Today's press conference takes place in advance of massive mobilizations across the country, which are expected to take place this Sunday, September 18th. The organizations that join us today on this presser are 3 of 480 civil society organizations demanding an inclusive regularization program that provides full and permanent immigration status for all as Parliament resumes in sessions in the coming weeks. So we'll start by hearing from Ryan, Kalum, and then Stacey with time for questions at the end. Media can signal if they have a question by typing into the chat, or you can put a Zoom reaction. Ryan, we'll start off with you.
Great. Thanks so much, Tina. So as Tina mentioned, my name is Ryan McRae. I am here with the Cooper Institute, where the Migrant Worker Program has been underway for about a decade now. And I would say in that time, the majority of the issues that we have seen have definitely could be classified as issues in status. I would say almost every day we hear from people who either want to switch employers, they want to work under another employer to get some additional hours, or folks that also want to stay in PEI or want to bring their families here, right? All of which are issues in status, really. We know in this country, there's 1 in 23 people who are here either without documentation or on temporary basis. And it puts them in this weird kind of precarious status. And the biggest thing I think I want to highlight today is how quickly that can change, right? We've seen here on PEI, people might leave their employer, and as soon as they leave that employer, their status is kind of in jeopardy. They definitely can't work for anybody else. We also see that one thing that Cooper Institute has been heavily involved with has been some open work permit applications for vulnerable workers. In one area in particular, there was 22 applications that were approved from the same location. But what's interesting about these applications, the government really points to these as kind of like the golden child, right? What will really kind of fix some of the issues with the program. But we see that people are issued, if they're approved for this work permit, they're issued a 1-year open work permit. What happens after that is, within 1 day, all of a sudden, boom, their status is gone. Someone could be left in this place without documentation, right? We also see sometimes here in PEI, what we've seen is sometimes people's status can change quickly, and it's actually through some issues with employers. So in one instance, there was an individual who was here with a study permit. An employer said that they had work authorization on that and began working. Later on, this individual got a work permit and was applying for PR, and it was found out that they were working without proper authorization and were faced with looking at a deportation order. This individual left and is still unable to come back here to a community that they were really, really a part of, right? Really vital to that community, and it's a shame that is happening in this country and in our province. And another individual, they were here with a work permit. They were going through the PR process, and what we saw was their employer, when they had to extend their work permit, their employer didn't submit some of the documentation. They were then deemed like they weren't approved for that work permit. So they appealed that decision and reapplied, giving them implied status for that period of time. After which, when the application came back and it was denied a second time, right, they had to leave. So status can change so quickly. This individual had to leave and go back to their home country, and they were actually missing a newborn child that them they and their partner had. So that's 2 months they were gone before they could come back. These are huge issues that happen, right? And we want to see people have status. We want to make sure that there's no barriers to this, right? We're kind of done with this pathway thing. We want to make sure the government issues permanent residency for all the 1.7 million folks here on temporary or undocumented individuals. mainly just because what we see here on PEI especially is there's folks who are here under different programs who are ineligible for government programs because of some of the requirements put in place. In particular, folks in the seasonal agriculture worker program are ineligible for all of them just simply due to the length of the time that they are allowed to stay here. The program typically people might be eligible for in PEI is the critical worker stream, so the PNP program. But even for that, the folks that we deal with, there's the barriers are just way too high. So, we're kind of done with that. So we're hoping that folks would be willing to join us at Victoria Park. We'll be there this Sunday from 1 to 3, trying to envision, a province and a country where status is no longer an issue. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Ryan. And we'll pass it off to Kalum.
Thank you so much, Ryan, for that incredible introduction and for the description of the issues and workers that you're facing with. So the Madhu Center in New Brunswick, it's a very new organization. We actually came together a few months ago because there is no dedicated migrant worker serving organization in the province. So when we were alerted, a bunch of volunteers were alerted to an issue where a dozen migrant workers from Mexico were facing exploitation like wage theft and other forms of abuse. There was no one around to help them. So a group of volunteers got together and did what they could, and later on incorporated this organization into a nonprofit dedicated to serving migrant workers. So today we've been focusing on helping workers in cases where there's abuse, so with open work permit applications. But the main issues faced, again, like Ryan said, are issues of status. For example, right here in the province, over the summer, we have hundreds at a time, different groups of workers who work on the fish plants, but because of lobster prices, employers stop buying lobsters and there's just simply no work, or under severe underemployment where workers are expecting to work full time, but they have a few days of work here and there. And those are cases that leave people in the gray area where they're not necessarily facing issues of abuse, but neither can they apply for income support like employment insurance because they're not laid off. They just don't have work, and they're not able to work for different employers because their work permit is so tied to their specific employer. And what we're also seeing is that although these workers are classified as temporary foreign workers, many of them have been in the country for many, many years. We're working to support a family of workers right now who's been working for the same employer for the past 20 years. So what we're seeing is that we are giving permanent people temporary rights to work in the country to fill permanent labor needs. So this is an issue of status. That's why we believe workers who are here, they are needed here. They should have the full rights of every single worker who's working here. And I think that wraps up what I have to say about this.
Thank you, Kalum. And Stacey, we'll hand it off to you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Stacey Gomez. I work with the Migrant Workers Program known as Legal Nova Scotia, and we're the only migrant worker-centered organization in Nova Scotia. And together with the other organizations that are here today, we're members of the Migrant Rights Network. We are part of the calls throughout the country calling for full and permanent immigration status for all migrants. And I just would definitely echo what has already been shared, and I won't repeat what has already been shared. I also, in our experiences, we see a lot of what has already been mentioned by the other speakers. And so here in Nova Scotia, there are about 2,000 migrant workers, primarily in the agriculture sector and then in the seafood sector that come each year through our migrant workers program. We are working with both migrant farm and fish plant workers throughout the province. We hear from all corners of the province on a regular basis about workers being in a situation of abuse, whether it's outright physical attacks by their employers, issues of wage theft, unjustly being repatriated back to their home country, sometimes arbitrarily, just so many different issues that are happening throughout this province. And so we know and we see through this work that that it's really systemic, these issues that are happening. It's not about individualized cases. There's just so much that happens throughout the province that it's just so obvious that it is a systemic issue. And at the root of this vulnerability faced by migrant workers is the temporary immigration status, that workers are treated with temporary rights, which limits their ability to speak out in the workplace. If they speak out, they risk being fired, sent back to their home country, and not be able to come back on the farm work program again. And this is a major, this would be a major loss for people who are here supporting their families back home, oftentimes. And so it's just definitely, it's too much of a risk for people often to be able to speak out. And so we are joining the calls for full and permanent immigration status for all migrants, including people who are migrant workers, yes, undocumented people, refugees, migrant students throughout the country. We've seen so far only piecemeal, small changes, but we need to see a broad-based program that doesn't leave anyone behind. Lastly, I would also invite everyone to join us. We'll be in Antigonish in Nova Scotia on Saturday with an art project that aims to highlight the dignity, the joy of migrants throughout our communities here. And we'll be talking to folks there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stacey, and thank you so much to all our speakers today. So we will open it up to questions if there are any. Okay, and hearing no questions, we will be concluding this press conference. And thank you so much for everyone who's joined us today.